Don't dye red. I'm gonna dye my hair red. Okay, I already bought the kit. Don't do it. I'm so stressed out. Sorry.
We can both have red hair, Rachel.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Never mind then. Sorry.
What else, man?
You ready?
How do we do? Can we get rid of that thing? Or
It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
It's fine. Alright. Sorry.
Hurry, we only have half an hour left. They're gonna kick us out.
They'll be fine. They can
Okay.
live. I hope it doesn't cut off the.
You just want to make sure it's still
Is that-
recording. There. Okay. Okay.
Take 2.
We're presenting today our project for ancient Greece class called about Sappho. I'm Ryan,
I'm Gwen.
I'm Rachel.
and I'll get us started. The poet Sappho was referred to by Plato as the 10th muse, and her poetry was loved and praised by Solon the Wise. Her influence can be felt in poets from Horace to Tennyson. To the modern enthusiast, however, she is a figure who has been mostly obscured by history and whose works have been almost completely lost. What we know about her life and most of her works is only possible through the ripples left in her wake, in the impression that she left on future authors by descriptions of her that were colored either by glowing praise or disparaging parody, or in quotations by ancient grammarians who used her poetry for instruction. Getting to the person behind the hearsay is a difficult task for modern scholars and requires a fairly large amount of inference and scrupulous study. What we have of her work today is in fragmentary form, with few relatively complete poems, including the Ode to Aphrodite, the Brothers poem, the Phinitai Moi, the Tithonus poem, and To an Army Wife in Sardis. We can say a few things about the life of Sappho with a fair amount of certainty. She was born about 630 BCE and died about 570 BCE. She lived in Mytilene, the capital of the island of Lesbos, located off the coast of Anatolia. She was a leader in the Aeolian school of lyric poetry, along with Alcaeus. She may have had a daughter named Cleis and brothers named Caraxus, Laricus, and Eurydius. Her poetry was meant to be sung with a lyre. She writes mostly in the first person in the local Aeolic dialect, often about love and always with passion. Her poems she wrote in a meter that would come to be referred to as the Sapphic style, which consists of 4-line stanzas, with the first 3 lines being long and the 4th being short. An example of a Sapphic stanza is from the Ode to Aphrodite. Come to me once more and abate my torment. Take the bitter care from my mind and give me all I long for. Lady, in all my battles, fight as my comrade. Notable poets who wrote in this style were Catullus, Horace in his odes, Alexander Pope, and Ezra Pound. The Ode to Aphrodite is her best-known work today. It consists of 28 lines in which Sappho pleads to Aphrodite to help her through the torment of unrequited love. Aphrodite assures the author that now she runs away, but she'll soon pursue you. Gifts she now rejects, soon enough she'll give to you. Now she doesn't love you, but soon her heart will burn, though unwillingly. The Brothers poem is the most recently rediscovered in 2014. Only the very beginning is missing. Sappho invokes Hera and expresses worry about her brother Caraxus, who is out sailing, but is confident that the gods will protect him. Her poems were compiled into 9 volumes that have been lost to history, either through deliberate or unintentional destruction. Rumors about her death circulated and were popularized by Ovid in Phaon, that she flung herself off a ledge onto white rocks because of her unrequited love for a sailor named Phaon. It's more likely, however, that she lived to old age, as her Tithonus poem describes her black hair turning white and her knees being too weak to support her.
When we speak about Sappho's ancient influence, we know that she was highly regarded by some of her contemporaries, but there's so much more of her that we do not know because of the lack of physical evidence. What we do know is that Sappho was born into a privileged life on the island of Lesbos. Incidentally, this is where the word lesbian comes from, as Sappho often wrote of romantic love between women. It is also known that she had a freedom to write that few others had during her time. Solon the Wise, ruler of Athens, is thought to have heard Sappho's poetry and remarked that he wanted to learn it before he died, which was an incredible honor. Catullus translated Fame Moi into Latin, and Ovid wrote a pseudo-epigraphical letter in her name. Her poems were used for instruction by ancient grammarians. It is also known that she was honored with statuary and had coins minted in her name in her honor with her name and image on them, which was quite a feat for a woman at the time. Sappho's legacy in the ancient world is conveyed through praise and parody. She occasionally appeared in Greek comedies, usually depicted as a licentious woman who relentlessly pursued sexual encounters. What a wonderful way to be portrayed. Her books originally filled 9 volumes and were even located in the Library of Alexandria in Egypt, but most of them have been lost to time and all we have are fragments. Her poetry, like all poetry of the time, was read aloud, especially during dinner parties, accompanied by the lyre. We also know that she was very provocative and was possibly exiled to Sicily because of her political beliefs.
Sappho's influence on art and literature remains widespread and impactful in modern society as well as ancient. Although her works were lost in time for a number of years, they gained an enormous resurgence in the medieval period. In fact, several of the artistic renditions depicted throughout this presentation were created between the 14th and 17th centuries in Italy and Greece. The ideas and beautiful poetry of Sappho has increased in popularity throughout the Renaissance to modern times. Sappho's legacy among writers and poets is apparent in the work of such famous names as William Shakespeare, A.E. Housman, and Alfred Lord Tennyson. Other parts of her work have been studied and translated by scholars such as Percy Shelley and Lord Byron, whose works reflect the sensitive and romantic language of Sappho. Byron's poem, The Isles of Greece, mentions her in the lines, "The Isles of Greece, the Isles of Greece, where burning Sappho loved and sung." These authors and others have clearly been directly inspired by Sappho in several of their works, even though few lines and fragments of her original poetry remain. Sappho, referred to as the poetess, has certainly lived up to her namesake throughout the modern era. A book by Thomas Campion titled Observations in the Art of English Poesy, published in 1602, applies the Sapphic meter to several of his works. In 1728, John Hughes wrote, "The Sapphic meter is indeed very musical, and what Horace seems best to have practiced. But methinks it is too soft, and fit only to be employed on love and pleasant easy subjects. It seems too much confined, like the usual measure of our songs, and the lofty sense of some of his odes is above it." In Volume 1 of The Present State of the Republic of Letters. The Sapphic meter, which is an innovative tool she utilized for her poetry, as aforementioned, is a distinctive poetic form that is still being used today and has been employed by such famous poets as Ezra Pound, mentioned earlier, and also Anne Carson. These contemporary bards have studied and written poems in the style that Sappho used to write her own work, such as the Ode to Aphrodite. Carson, who is a poet and scholar of classics, published a work called If Not Winter, Fragments of Sappho in 2003. This contains a collection of the whole of Sappho's discovered work in both Greek and English, and deftly captures the spirit of Sappho's unmistakable meter and style. Pound, on the other hand, wrote a short poem titled Papyrus, inspired by Sappho. It is based on the fragments of Sappho's found poetry, and it is only 3 lines long, saying, "Spring, too long, Gongula." Sappho's influence didn't stop at fellow poets and authors. The modern term lesbian is taken from the name of her home island of Lesbos, and her literature has certainly impacted the movement of feminism and women's rights in the 20th and 21st centuries. In November of 2015, a stage production entitled Morning and Evening was performed in London at the Royal Opera. This live show describes a relationship between Sappho and her young lover, Atthis, and alternates between German and ancient Greek, with the imagery of Sappho's poetry being kept in mind. It also tells the love story in reverse, from ending to conception. While there has always been speculation and debate over Sappho's sexual orientation, with some even attempting to erase any evidence of her possible homosexuality, her works have inspired generations of feminists and members of the LGBTQ+ community through beautiful flowing verse and descriptive words of open feeling and unbridled passion. And now we will close with a reading of a poem by Sappho composed from various fragments titled An Ode to Atthis.
I loved you, Atthis, years ago, when my youth was still all flowers and sighs, and you seemed to me such a small, ungainly girl. Can you forget what happened before? If so, then I'll remind you how, while lying beside me, you wove a garland of crocuses, which I then braided into strands of your hair.
And once, when you'd plaited a double necklace from 100 blooms, I tied it around the swanning, sun-licked ring of your neck, and on more than one occasion, there were 2 of them to be exact, while I looked on, too silent with adoration to say your name, you glazed your breasts and arms with oil.
No holy place existed without us then, no woodland, no dance, no sound. Beyond all hope, I prayed those timeless days we spent might be made twice as long. I prayed one word, I want. Someone, I tell you, will remember us, even in another time.
And we do.